Hello, welcome to another episode of Somewhere Between a film and TV podcast. We're your hosts. I am Daniel Parra.
And I'm Erwin Trejo.
And number one, thank you so much for listening. Number two, what are they going to do?
Imagine liking, commenting, and subscribing.
Don't just imagine it, please do it.
Dragon.
You can do whatever you want, but it would help us out a whole lot.
Don't do dragons.
Don't do that, they're fictional. And
Name a fictional character.
Dragon.
I'm sorry.
Well, let's move on.
Okay.
So everything we review has full spoilers because we're not fully the best at breaking that down, but we're going to break down this movie.
Kind of like how I break down.
What are we reviewing, Erwin?
Dance. I'm sorry, you said break down, and I was like, oh, like dance.
Yeah. What are we reviewing, Erwin?
Blink twice.
Yeah.
Like people say I blink a lot when I disagree with something that they say, and I tend to blink.
You do that, yeah.
I'm like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't even realize that.
I never get that from you.
And you know what I realized today too?
What?
That when I genuinely find something funny, I have like 3 different versions how I laugh. Like the one where I bust out laughing, like I go like, I'll just look at you and I go, bah!
Yeah.
And then the other one is my girly laugh comes out.
Uh-huh.
And then the other one is where I laugh to the side, like I look away and I laugh.
Yeah, because you're like nervous and you're shy and they're making you kick your feet and giggle. I get it.
I feel like 2 of my laughs came out right there.
You kicking your feet?
A little.
Yeah. So tell us, Erwin, what is Blink Twice about?
When tech billionaire Slater King meets cocktail waitress Frida at his fundraising gala, he invites her to join him and his friends on a dream vacation on his private island. As strange things start to happen, Frida questions her reality.
That I like whenever we read the IMDb synopsis or I hear you like say what the description is, because I'm always like, I guess that's the movie. Because it never fully fits what I think I would say.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, to be totally fair, though, this movie is based off of the whole mystery box idea of what's going on, why are things the way that they are in this. And fully getting into this movie, Erwin, it's tough to ask, what do you think of this director's previous work? Because this is Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, first thing she's ever directed. It's kind of crazy considering, getting ahead of myself here, but how well directed this movie is.
Yes.
But what are your experiences? Let's go with their acting. Some of the actors in here. Channing Tatum.
I love Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Channing Tatum. I think his best performance is to Step Up.
A lot of people have been saying that. I think his best...
Or any of the Magic Mike movies. Anytime he's dancing, I think that's the best time he's ever performed. And 21 and 22 Jump Street, because he's hilarious.
I think his best performances are 22 Jump Street. Genuinely, I do. I think he is...
Oh, if we're doing that, then Foxcatcher.
Okay, Foxcatcher.
He's great.
And what's Logan Lucky?
Oh, yeah, Logan
is
Lucky
amazing.
is
And what's the other one?
Anytime he's a lead actor, he's great.
Anytime... Recently, Gambit.
Gambit.
I actually thought he was great as that.
Yeah.
Like, he steals the show in that. I think there's
That's a movie.
Huh? He what?
He's in a movie, not a show.
He steals the. It's an expression. He steals the movie.
Well, why don't you
anytime.
express it correctly?
Because I'm using it the right way. You're the one that's questioning.
No, I don't know.
I think
Question your reality.
That's like the Matrix.
Okay.
I think that anytime he's in something, he's always the standout. And I want you to also add this performance to your list of his best performances, because I think he's incredible in this movie. I think he's not necessarily the lead of it. He's definitely co-lead in a way, kind of.
Yes.
He's in so much of this movie. He, at a point, is the antagonist for sure. He is the villain 100% at a point in this movie. But were you used to any of the other actors here, or like?
Oh, let me see. I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Aaliyah Shawkat, I think.
She was in Arrested Development.
Yeah.
That's where I mostly know her from. Christian Slater. I feel like I've seen him in things, but not realizing that's Christian Slater.
I love Christian Slater. I thought Mr. Robot was great.
Okay.
And he's great in it.
Simon Rex. He's in the horror, like those parody movies, scary movies.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, I looked at him up.
I know him.
So like, he has a familiar face.
I know him from the idea of the fact that he's in Bottle Rocket, and I have not seen. No, not Bottle Rocket. It's the other one. It's called Red Rocket.
Oh.
Bottle Rocket's the Wes Anderson movie.
Okay. How do you pronounce her name?
Adria Arjona, who was in a movie we reviewed earlier this year, Hitman.
Yeah, great.
Great. And Andor, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and Andor.
Also great.
Haley Joel Osment, of course. I mean...
unrecognizable face. Very recognizable.
The most recognizable face. From hit show The Boys and nothing else for
Nothing
sure.
else. Oh, man. Other than that, oh, yeah, Kyle
MacLachlan, who I love from Twin Peaks, and...
Gina Davis from the hit movie Stuart Little.
She's in other stuff. Yeah, she's definitely in Stuart Little.
I love Stuart Little.
It's really good. Also written by M. Night Shyamalan. So I guess Haley Joel Osment and Gina Davis have that in common.
That's amazing. I did not know that. Though.
I just pieced that together just now. So what we're going to do is we're going to guide you through this movie and break it down, beginning, middle, end, our positives and negatives here. So, Erwin, tell me.
You said break it down.
Overall,
yes.
What'd you think of this?
I loved it.
Yeah?
Yes. I thought this movie was really good.
Yeah.
From the characters that were introduced from the very beginning and then how it progressed along the way. I thought it was really good.
So I loved this movie too. I loved it quite a bit, in fact. I thought it was such a strong directorial debut. Unbelievable that it is.
I wouldn't believe it was her first time though. That's how this movie felt.
No, because Zoe Kravitz, maybe it's because she's been in the industry for long enough that she's seen the practical applications of being able to do stuff like this. But whenever you're an actor and you transition, I know some people have trouble with that in terms of us, like George Clooney. Let's admit it. He sucks at it sometimes. And
oh, yeah, he directs sometimes.
Sometimes, and they're usually not that great. I didn't see The Boys in the Boats or whatever it was called. But it sounds like a made-up movie, I know. But I
Clint Eastwood does it sometimes well.
And sometimes not well at all.
Yes.
It's a difficult thing to do. And I like that she said the inspiration for this movie, and fully spoiling something that's in the final third of this movie, she said that she got the idea from the people in power that were around her that were able to hide the things that they're able to hide. And it sort of gave her that inspiration for the women that are in this movie to be able to actually sort of have an agency on that. So there is a real idea here. I've seen people compare it to Get Out, but about Me Too. I've seen people compare it to other Twilight.
It's actually really a good comparison, Get Out with Me Too.
Yeah, because it really is. And there's a lot of... This movie's about a couple themes that we'll get into. I think it is primarily about gaslighting and emotional and physical abuse. And these are touchy subjects, we know, but the movie handles them with... Honestly, it's crazy. This movie's able to navigate a lot of different tones here. There are times where it's really serious and some of the stuff you're watching is really graphic. And there are other times where in the first initial half, it can navigate being funny, but then being scary.
Yes.
And it is insane to be able to navigate that sort of tone at the rate that this movie does it. But fully getting into it, how does this movie start off?
It first starts off with, what are the characters' names? Frida and Jess. So they're both roommates, right?
Yeah.
From what I remember. And they're both waitresses at this gala-esque thing for this tech billionaire, Slater, Channing Tatum plays.
Yeah.
And it's weird because Frida's like, it sounds like has this obsession
she has like a thing
for Slater,
him. Yeah,
right? Of course, it's Channing Tatum, he's attractive.
Yeah, but I think that's the implication here.
Yes, and so Frida is like, eventually, like Frida and Jess had this way to actually be a part of the gala and not just work there.
Yeah.
And somehow Frida gets in and was able to make a connection and be able to talk to Slater. And after that, that's when they were both able to Frida and Jess to be part of this whole vacation that Slater asked them to join.
So right before that,
yes.
I want to get into a couple of the storytelling and camera work techniques that are in this. It's funny, at the beginning this kind of starts off I know you don't want to talk about The Crow again, but this also starts off with
Stop!
It starts off with an opening shot of that animal and we don't know what it's about. I mean, a lot of movies like this have these sort of art house indications that they're like going for something avant-garde or weird, but then that comes back later in a really pivotal way. But then right after, we see her on... I thought it was funny the way that they show her using reels on
Hey, dude,
Instagram.
I'm still thinking about what you said about the way that my laugh is, where I laugh a lot and I kick my feet.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I don't know if you do or not. I'm just saying that you definitely do for me. So we were...
Oh, so you do commit, huh?
So I thought it was funny that this is exactly how I go to the bathroom.
I kick my feet.
No, not like that.
No, I'm about to poop.
It's funny because we were complaining, and I think it's only because we were talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
This movie's alchemy and its pacing,
Mm-hmm.
it's so well paced. It's honestly, get into critiques later, maybe a little too short, but
Yes.
immediately I'm hooked on the fact that she's watching this video on this interview of Channing Tatum, and then she's going through all these reels.
Yes.
But which is just kind of how you like get on the phone, right?
Yeah.
What I like about that is immediately how kind of this transitions from her watching the video, then she Googles like what did he do, and then it's like all these different things. We never find out what he does.
Yes.
Later on, you can kind of infer.
Yes.
But it's just this idea that he's this billionaire type. And we're supposed to put our own previous thoughts into this. What kind of person does that? What sort of person has to address allegations about misuse of power, right?
Yes.
I like it because it immediately makes him inaccessible to her in a way where she like idolizes him.
Yeah.
Even despite these flaws.
Well, even then, it's just like them being roommates, you get to see like how they live and what they are going through too.
Yeah.
And you can see like the different like lives that they're both living in as well.
Yeah, because it's such a contrast.
Yes.
Because of his idea where you see him every day, right? He's
Yes.
like, in terms of just the ability to watch these videos or have access to him in that way. A lot of people treat celebrity like this, where they live vicariously through them.
Yes.
And I think that's great. I think it's a really easy way for you to sympathize with these two main leads right away. Because we'll get to it, but Naomi Ackie is more of the lead than her roommate is. But that's because of something that happens later on in the movie. So getting into that with the gala you mentioned, lavish, right?
Yes, very.
I think the whole contrast there is supposed to be that they're working in the back. They're there with all of the regular items and things. And then once they walk out, he's giving this speech, right? And it's just this white. It's like supposed to be this idea of nothing there, right? And whenever they're meeting them, they do actually have a really nice chemistry with each other because they're building off of this chemistry that all these people have with each other before they take off to this island. And I want to ask you what you thought between the dynamic of both the two leads and then Channing Tatum and Naomi Ackie.
I thought it was great. And I think it's because when they had their first interaction with one another, because I was just thinking about it, the one thing that really felt solidified with their chemistry to me was whenever Channing Tatum breaks out the other heel from her and says like, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that. I've seen like in movies or something like that."
I saw it in a movie once.
And I was just like, after that, I was like, "Oh my god, I don't know why it works." Like, and I think it's just because those little subtle things that feel true, like an actual like relationship is building.
Yeah,
and you see that, and I felt that as like an audience.
And that's because Channing Tatum is genuinely a very charming person. It's why we always say, whenever he shows up in anything, all his random cameo things he keeps doing, he's always the best part because you never expect him, and then when you do, he immediately kills it, and then he leaves and goes who knows where.
And we're like, no, where are you going?
Like, let's say Bullet Train, for example.
I
was like, I'd rather follow. Like, what's he up to?
What is he up to?
And then they take it to the island after this, right? And the set design here is amazing. I don't know if they filmed this in like real location stuff, but I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where they went. Offhandedly, I do want to mention the original script for this was not called Blink Twice. It was called Pussy Island, I believe.
Yes.
And obviously you can't really name like a major theatrical movie this.
Yes.
Maybe if it was more independent, but no, they put this in theaters. Like there was marketing for this. There was a lot of marketing for it. And fully getting into once they go onto the island, did you pick up on any of the things that were going to go wrong here right away, or what were your like sort of feelings here about?
I think for me was the language barriers for sure between the maid and everybody else. I thought that was strange. The of course the phone aspect.
Oh, the whole idea where he's like, you don't have to do anything
you don't want to.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think because another thing was like the manipulation thing aspect as well. Because even if stuff like that is happening, it's like, I was like, I mean, you have a choice, but it's also like the undertone of it as well.
Yeah, like there's sort of an implied idea of there's already something inherently wrong with that, right?
Yes.
Like,
and even then, like even the roommate herself just felt so weird. Like we was saying like these obvious things, like us, the audience, like what? Why would you say that? Or like, why would we do that? Like why do we need to do that type of thing? But it's also like the group setting as well, and like following along, which I can see like the very like the pressures of it too.
Yeah.
But there's like stuff like that was like where it's like what's wrong, or like also the perfume. The perfume plays a big part, and for sure seeing like a random full size perfume in a room, that's so like that was already strange to me.
There were a couple different things that were kind of odd. It was this like makeup that already had hair.
Oh
in it,
yes, and she was like, "Oh, gross."
Yeah.
Try again. And I was like, "What?"
No, yeah. So, I love how this movie looks. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Like, I think that visually this movie's pristine. It's beautiful to look at.
It looks the warmth of it too. It looks amazing.
No, genuinely, there's a kind of baked quality to everything around it. It has this very golden glow. The moment whenever... Here's another thing I thought was weird, and they even offhandedly mention it in this movie, is her roommate is like, is it not weird that they already have clothes for us, like, in advance?
Yeah.
And knowing how this movie goes, and a couple of the things that are implied in it, yeah, it is weird.
Yeah.
But whenever they're like, it's just a rich people thing. Like, I kind of thought the same thing.
I thought the same thing too. But then now I'm like, when you just mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, they did say that. And then I'm thinking of what happens later on, and I'm like now connecting, and I'm like, oh
because there are like two different twists in this movie. One of them I guessed off of something we'll get into, but the other one I did not know was...
That was unexpected.
Yeah. And if it's the fingernail thing that you're talking about, then yeah. But there's so many different horror movies and movies like this build on really interesting ways where they give you a lot of subtle visual cues immediately. And it's supposed to be so you can kind of pick up on what's this that's actually going on.
Yes.
And even if you figure out one of the twists, I feel like guaranteed you won't get the other one.
Yes.
Because I definitely didn't.
I didn't.
Yeah.
But then again, there's no fun like trying to guess the twist right away too.
No, for me, I guess we'll get into that. We talk about what's a twist and what's not a twist.
Yeah.
Do you like being taken along for the ride of something, or do you like trying to get ahead of the movie?
No, I like the ride.
Yeah.
Like I like to go by however the director and the writer is trying to make me go through this movie. Yeah. Because even if I guess the twist right away, I don't care too, because I'm like, how does the twist work along the way?
No, because for me, I want to get there. I want to see... We always talk about spoilers. Like, sometimes I had, let's say, Infinity War spoiled for me in advance. Yeah. However, people always try and do that douchey thing in, like, YouTube comments or wherever where they're like, haha, this person dies. And you're like, cool.
And then, Solo.
But, oh, yeah, that was one of our big ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then... you get to find out why. Nobody ever spoils the why of anything.
Or even how it's like how the story around it, everything too. Because even when knowing Han Solo dies, it was so sad to see in Force Awakens. Yeah. Because knowing why, like, he was killed by Kylo Ren. Like, nobody told me that. Yeah. I thought he just died.
Or the implications of that being is like his dad or anything like that.
No one said anything about that. He just died.
Which ties into this in the sense that movies like this rely on the surprise factor of something that happens later. Yes. So when I saw the comparison to Get Out, I started thinking about that movie, and I was like, they are structured very similarly. As a matter of fact, they're almost the same runtime, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
But it also has that same concept that we'll talk probably later on. Yeah. Where about the twist, what the other twist is. Yeah. But
so...
All right, so they're at the island getting ready, and this is the part where I guess like those montage scenes starts to happen, and it feels like day in day out the same.
And it starts to feel kind of everything mixed in together, right?
Yes, and it's just them like partying, having like dinner, games. It seems like, and a lot of like flirting, especially between the main two leads. I would say like Frida and Slater.
Yeah, and they do have a really great chemistry with each other. I don't know if this movie fully works in the sense of something we'll get into if it doesn't, because that sort of trust there is an important aspect of this movie. And going back to that, I do want to ask you, did you think that any of this stuff went on for too long, or did you...
Probably like the montage for sure.
Yeah.
A couple of times. It just felt very repetitive.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know if that's because if we're supposed to feel the same way as like the characters did too.
We're caught up in if this is a flaw or not, in the sense of they're not supposed to know and neither are we.
Yes.
So it gets kind of difficult to try and parse if that's the positive of the movie or a negative of it, because we're trying to figure out why everything feels so happy and okay all the time, and why some things are repeated visually but then feels just slightly off, right? Because I think there's actually a really great payoff with how they do that in the middle of this movie, where they repeat the same visual of them on the chairs over and over and over up until one of them's missing, right?
Yes.
And it's her roommate.
Yes.
Which I want to get into right before I mention this. There's a great use of a misdirect here with the Chekhov's gun idea with the lighter.
Oh, yes.
Because
I love that. Every time she's like, where's my lighter?
Yeah.
Who has my lighter?
Because you keep thinking that it's going to go somewhere, right?
Yes.
Channing Tatum, thinking back on this, you're like, God, this guy's a douchebag.
Yeah.
But he keeps on... His only fixation in this movie is on if his chair is in the right place.
Yes.
I think that's really underscored by the idea that his mind is so preoccupied with something so trivial that the more and more you think back on this movie, the more you're like, that dude sucks.
Yes.
And you think that someone even says, I want this chair set on fire. And then you're consistently shown a lighter, right? So my brain was like, that's going towards that, right? Like that's going to go there. But then I think what ends up actually happening is whenever they keep saying the name over and over, Jess, I need to put my name on this, who has this. And then eventually when they figure something out is wrong, it happens earlier than you're anticipating that it will. So I thought that was great because you kept thinking that it was going, at least I did, thinking that it was going to build towards something towards the end of the movie. Yeah. And then ended up being kind of in the middle. Yeah. Which I thought was really great.
Yeah, but I mean, even then, like, there were so many other things that, like, happen along the way where they start to connect things. Yeah. That it just kept progressing the story and it kept you invested as well.
No, and this movie uses that to great effect. It keeps repeating certain visual shots that you're like, this will be important, I think, later. And these plot points that feel like kind of thrown around for a while, where they're like, oh, we have a pest problem with the snakes, and then it turns out that is actually integral to the plot, and you have no idea it is until later. And this key visual that you're used to nowadays, but the idea of how important a vape is in this is actually kind of crazy, because you're used to that just for like a billionaire to kind of do that, or a person of that stature to just kind of carry that around, right? And do that anywhere. I've seen people just, vape in bathrooms even though they're not supposed to.
Just vape anywhere.
Anywhere. And usually their excuse is like, I mean, it's not cigarettes, right?
I'm like, it's still smoking, my guy.
And then it turns out that that's actually key for his remembering of things. That's crazy. Yeah. That
for him to remember?
For the idea of the thing at the end where like, the way he forgets.
Yeah, because I don't know. It's just like, it's kind of hard now because when I'm like, the way we were describing this whole movie going down to the very end of the movie, a lot of things just connect and it just starts to make sense on like what he does.
A lot of things connect in retrospect of you thinking about the movie as you've gone through it. Yes. So a lot of things are presented as details. We don't know what it means yet, right? But we will later on in time. Yes. And I think this movie's so cleverly written, like unbelievably so.
Because then after, Frida is getting suspicious and it's like, okay, my friend's gone. And then eventually, Sarah. Yeah. She also starts to feel very suspicious and weird about everything as well. and they're trying to like figure out ways of like how to distract the boys, how to get the girls to like realize what's happening, everything as well. And I think it was Frida, right? It was Frida that found out like the venom,
right,
that was introduced by the maid, because she kept saying Red Robin to her, and then eventually the maid had Frida drink this venom. Yeah. And then that's when Frida was able to like start to like remember things consistently.
There's another thing with nosebleeds in here, or the fact that once the whole thing about her getting bitten for the first time is like, oh no, nothing will happen to you, and then all of a sudden she disappears right after that. A lot of this movie, its reveals work, and the reason why like we might appear scattered right now is because a lot of the reveals are later and then in retrospect. Because now talking about it out loud and saying it, this movie I think is really, really smart in terms of how it reveals information and how it goes about doing it. So I think this would probably hold up incredibly well on a rewatch in terms of viewing it entirely differently, from a different lens. And fully going into that, I don't know if you have any positives or negatives about the way in which this movie kind of has a fractured structure a little bit. If you were like,
what do you mean?
Were you ever lost or confused during this? Or
I was only confused on the times where it just kept repeating itself, but it was not to like the characters themselves in the movie. It's just myself as like an audience, just like going like, oh well, it's just things keep happening over. Yeah. But of course, it's like later on, it's more like, okay, I understand what's happening, but other than that, like, no, I didn't have any like problems with that.
The reason why I ask is because I was reading audience reviews of this, and I mean, don't get me wrong, people appeared to really like it. Yes. But some of the people that I read weren't big fans of it. Were kind of saying, they were like, I feel like nothing really happens for a lot of this movie, and then the reveal I guessed, and I was like, I mean, that's not what it's about to me. And just guessing a twist. I know people pride themselves on doing that. And
okay, but even it's like, I hate going back. Even if you guess a twist, like then. Why don't you answer to me, going like, cool, you guessed the twist. Answer to me only. Yeah. Like, did it work for you? Yeah. Like how things played out. That's what I want to know. Because even like, because a lot of things when it comes to movies too, it's just also like the rewatchability aspect. And because sometimes like a movie can go happen and the twist happens and has no effect from the very beginning or like the middle. And so like you can just keep watching a movie. Could be a completely different movie again, and when the twist happens, and nothing could ever happen again. But with this movie, it has a great twist that when you watch it again, it's a whole other lens. Like
you said, it recontextualizes literally the entire movie. That's what great twists do, where you go back and you're like, oh my god, everything clicks and it does it well. Sometimes movies try and pull a twist on you and it doesn't work because they just wanted to go for the shock factor. And then you start to pick it apart, right? And you're like, wait, that doesn't work for multiple different reasons. Yes. Here, I think everything holds up perfectly. So then this is really once they start to figure out when things are wrong is when she first drinks the venom out of that thing, right? Because she's like, oh, what is this? And then she starts to have flashes, and I can't quite remember what her exact first memory was. I don't know if you do.
I think it was whenever she was digging through the photos.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because eventually she broke in because she was trying to. What was she trying to find? She was trying to find something. Yeah. I don't remember what exactly in the wherever the boys would be in. And because the boys left to go play golf.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so Sarah just kept the other girls occupied while Frida was trying to find some more information about them. And that's when she stumbled upon a box full of photos. Yeah. And that's when she looked through the photos, and then I think that's when she got she started to remember things.
Because they're documenting all of this stuff throughout this entire movie.
Keep in mind, like even throughout the movie, I think Christian Slater Vic. Yeah, he was taking photos. Taking all the photos and everything. And I think I think it's like most people in this movie, they were all taking photos. Yeah. So. And
that's sort of an implication of. I mean, do we know why? Not necessarily, other than the sense that they're trying to document memories. At least it comes off that way at first. But then she looks for that box of photos, and I do remember this. There's a really key detail where it's one in the past. Mm-hmm. And the girl next to him looks incredibly uncomfortable. Like, she looks like she doesn't want to be there. It's someone that we don't see because they're not there currently, but it's someone from the past. And you could just see it. It's in one of the Polaroids, and she's in the right corner. I remember that because I picked up on it right away, because it's one of those things where you're like, why? You know? So I think one other thing that is great about this is there's a repeated line. It's the tagline of the poster.
Oh, yes.
That they're asking, and you don't know why for such a long time. It says, "Are you having a great time? Are you having a good time?"
Are you having a good time?
That's repeated because you're like, "Oh, are you having a good time?" People hear it all the time.
Yes.
But then once you figure out the actual context in which it's used, where they're trying to measure their ability, like, to see if they remember anything, that's really well done, I think. I don't know if you feel any way about something specific like that, like if there's anything, because this movie has a lot of them.
Oh, I think because that line started to matter a lot to me was after they found out about the perfumes. Because it wasn't until like they looked through the bags and they realized, oh my god, these bags that contain the perfumes are the reason why we're unable to, or like the reason why like we're forgetting everything that's been happening to us. Yeah. And I think that's what you said, like that's like the best way of saying it. Like it was like a measure of saying like, well, do they remember what happened? Yeah. The only way is to ask them if they're having a good time, and if they're being consistent or even like content, then clearly it's working. The perfumes.
Yeah. And then what ends up happening, this movie kind of operates on the sense that it still wants to be humorous in a way, and that's really difficult to do with some of the subject matter that's in this. And addressing this going forward, there's some stuff in this movie. They tell you right at the beginning that there are some touchy subjects that admittedly we have to word them in a specific way, otherwise this video gets taken down. So we'll say physical abuse and physical harm and mental abuse. And these are things that we say were important to the Me Too era, and they're still happening now, and they are things that need to be addressed going forward and be taken seriously. And this movie is trying to critique the idea that no matter how rich you are, what kind of person you are, you can get away with this if you have any sort of access to something that can let you get away with that. Because in the pivotal scene where they're trying to give everyone shots and they're trying to navigate that, there's an undercurrent where you've seen what happened to them and why they're so persistent on this happening. Because that scene is hard to watch. Fair warning if you haven't seen this movie yet and you're wanting to listen to this. That way you can try and figure out if you're willing to watch this. It is a bit difficult to watch. Some of the stuff here is a hard sit. But then the final third is wanting to pay this off in a way where these people kind of get their comeuppance in a way, right?
Yes, they get their revenge. On the people on the island. Yeah.
And some of the stuff here, once it gets to this part, because they all start remembering, this is whenever the final sort of chaos happens here, and I think it's really well done. I think a lot of it, this movie has this high frequency energy the whole time, and I don't know how she did it really. I think like it's really difficult to do here. And with this though, we finally get the reveal that these guys are evil and they're horrible people. And it's interesting that they sort of it was supposed to conduct the experiment of forgetting with the perfume, and of course they took it upon themselves to do other things when.
And that's why they had the, what's his name? Kyle MacLachlan Rich. I guess like
Kyle the therapist. If he actually was or wasn't.
Yeah. But I think one of the favorite scenes of mine that was happening was between Channing Tatum and Frida at the end.
Yeah. No, we'll get to it. Because I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
But before we get to that, is there any sort of build up and any kind of the payoff here that you really liked, or there?
I would just say honestly, it was when they're all dancing and they're all taking more shots and everything. Yeah. At the last like dinner.
Oh
everything. Yeah. And then it's I guess because now it's in a different lens, like because once we figure out like what everything is happening, and the two girls, Frida and Sarah, know what's been going on, it's such a different feeling now. Because all the other guys are acting the same. Yeah. While they know what's happening and they have to put on a face, a facade, to keep things going. Yeah. And just to give the girls some time to to wake up to what's happening.
Like what to do. Yeah. It becomes incredibly tense. Yes. This is whenever the key theme or the key tagline of the movie, "Are you having a great time?" and they keep asking this, and Channing Tatum keeps asking this whenever, because you can see it in his face. He's calculating, and then he like leans into her. He's like, "You smell different." And I thought all of that becomes so incredibly tense, and you're in that situation with them because you know the information now. That's the first initial twist of the movie, or the reveal of what's going on. The other one later is crazy, and I like didn't guess it at all. But whenever they finally pay that off with that, I really liked something specific about Channing Tatum here. It is the ability to be incredibly charming and persuasive and put on an absolute persona in front of people. But then you reveal that this guy is not any of these things. No. He can be, but once that's dropped, I think something that this movie's able to do is, he's a bigger dude in terms of being muscular. He's a little bit leaner in this one, but I think that's important because he's so much taller than everyone else, right? I think casting someone like this, their physical appearance is important because you trust this actor based off of not real life experience, but based off of the other roles he's played, and that he is usually the romantic lead. So once you cast against type, and you feel like this sort of betrayal, you feel that along with the character. Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly smart inversion of using Channing Tatum specifically.
I think I didn't think about that with his physical capabilities. I just thought of it more of just personality in the movie. Yeah. Because I do agree with the whole him being like a romantic lead for like many movies beforehand. Yeah. And him being charismatic is one thing, but seeing the contrast of him, being that very charming guy, and then later on figuring out like he's just very selfish in what he's trying to do and being a complete douchebag as well. And I think you can just definitely see that, especially once he figures out like they know, because like, it's obvious that he could do something. I think he can do something about it, but he doesn't. Yeah. Because, I mean, I guess later on, too, it's like once we talk about it, how, like, the third act plays along, too.
Yeah, because at this point, we're kind of in, like, transitioning into the third act. Because this is whenever everything breaks out, and they're, like, all kind of on the hunt for each other.
Yeah, they're all killing one another, basically. Yeah.
And I really wish... Let's get into marketing for a second. There's one line in this movie that's in the trailer I wish weren't. What? And it's Channing Tatum where he goes, well, everyone's dead. And it's in the trailer. Like, I think that's crazy.
Yeah. I forgot it. So I don't really try to pay attention to the trailers.
Yeah, but I think the trailer actually is really well done for this movie, so maybe that's why. Also, at our gym...
I do love good trailers.
At our gym, I kept seeing the marketing for this movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I think it is doing well. I hope it is. I think it's a really well done movie.
Yes, I think people should go see this movie.
Yeah. I said that this would feel like this year's The Menu, and I do feel like it kind of... There are some things about it where I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah. They're similar in the tones for sure, but I do think that this one's about a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, I love The Menu, but that one just criticizes the rich. This one criticizes a certain aspect of the abuse of their power. So we already know there is something wrong with Channing Tatum's character right off the bat, right? Because at the beginning he addresses that, but then you don't know for so long what it is. And I think it's interesting that it integrates a sci-fi element here about testing the idea of forgetting because of something in the third act that I want to address. And it's on the nose, but I think it's okay that it is. Let's talk about when this movie reveals what it's about. Okay. Which has to do with the big monologue that Channing Tatum gives at the end. What did you think of it?
I thought it was very powerful for his character. Yeah. In terms of like how he truly feels about the things that he's been doing. And it really shows that like he's capable of knowing what's right and what's wrong, but still chooses the wrong.
That's why I think that he did go to therapy, but there's an idea here that people, celebrities, politicians, or really anybody kind of goes to therapy, and then they manipulate the therapy speak to sort of get away with what they want to get away with, because they're like, I mean, I went to therapy for it, so obviously. So he's able to learn these things because he learns these words. He learns these things from his therapist, who's also in on this at a point that's revealed, and he's able to kind of weaponize that.
I mean, he even uses the own like perfume himself.
Yeah.
To forget the actions that are happening, that he's doing.
Yeah.
And what's happened to him in his past. Because it was like a very subtle thing. He says like, hey, he mentioned his sister.
Yeah.
And how he says like, what do you mean you don't remember? Like his sister going like, what do you mean you don't remember what happened to us as kids?
Yeah.
That we were abused. And he's like, why would I want to remember that? I want to forget about that. It's like things don't need to be remembered. Things need to be forgotten. And I was just like, wow.
His whole reasoning for his like, I mean, what do you mean? Why would I go do that with that person?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
They were. That's this idea of like a repressed memory that was really traumatic for him as a character.
Yes.
And then he's evil, right? So he like uses that, let's say, to excuse himself for his actions later on. You're not supposed to repeat these things, but he's able to do that to justify it because he learned this through therapy, that he can find specific wording to excuse this behavior. Even none of it is like, it's not good.
Yes.
And his entire, I think this is a credit to his acting ability here. His entire breakdown of the speech memorized, going through the emotions in his face where he goes, I'm sorry, over and over and over again, I thought was incredible.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great showcase for his acting ability. Like, we know that comedians are really skilled actors. He's been one for the middle part of his career.
Robin Williams.
Who was also able to do that for, like, really well for so long. But then that leads into... I was reading what some people thought of the ending, which we'll get into in a second. But the other twist of this movie.
Oh,
what was it?
It was the fact that Frida has been to the island before.
Yeah.
And that's where... and it makes sense because the maid kept saying Red Robin to her.
Yeah.
And another point of the movie was Frida, she does nails on the side.
Yeah, and they say that and you're kind of like...
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I guess she has an Instagram page
with
of
like
her
21
doing nails.
followers or something like that. Yeah.
And the maid kept saying Red Robin because the first time she went to the island, we were assuming it was the first time.
Yeah.
And she had, her nails were of a red robin. And that was the twist, the fact that she was there beforehand and she came back again. Yeah. And it seems like Slater, either he didn't remember or he remembers her and still brought her back.
No, he remembers her because he says, you forgot this whole island. And because he was
and you came back still.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but I feel like he may have forgotten too or something.
Yeah.
And I just say that just because because I think he said a line where it's like their chemistry, their bond with one another. You just keep coming back here to me.
I don't know if I just like was so long like this. Yeah. Thinking about it in retrospect, that I was like, this dude's so manipulative that I thought about it, that like he was just always like that. Yeah. And this ties into this movie also being about the idea of gaslighting in terms of quite literally, like they make them forget. And then they make them sound crazy. And then there's even a moment where she literally says they're making us sound crazy. And it's working. Yeah. And because she starts like holding the knife and everything, pays off really well, by the way. Yes. Whenever, I thought there's so many great setups here. And they all pay off, like I promise. Because it's crazy how effectively... It's the type of script where you're like, this was definitely thought about and like crossed over. Like, how can this lead to this? And... then the whole idea of like, oh, who stole my knife? And then there's a cut to where it's like, don't forget this. And then that's like just thrown out in the middle of the movie. Yeah. Because there are times I really like how this movie will just kind of interject where this movie structure, the way it works, it'll cut to things where like, well, when did this happen? Like what time?
Yeah, I just remember what you said about the knife now. Because it was her roommate Jess that was like, you need to hide this or something. Yeah. And it was just like, it was one of those like flashes that happened. Wow. Yeah. It's just insane.
No, because a lot of it is incredibly, and I feel like we gave it a certain score, and then the more I talk about it, the more I'm like,
I was like, we have to reach it right now. I'm like, well, dang, should I change that?
No, I'll stick to it because I do want to watch this movie again, because it does work in a way where I feel like you do have to watch it again. Yeah. I feel like I say that about a lot of what we review, but then I mean, hey, I like rewatching things. Yeah. But this leads into the ending where, were you surprised that she decided to keep him alive? Or
I was. Yeah. I was surprised because I guess I don't know. I think it's with something traumatic like that, I would think that you wouldn't want want anything to do with that anymore, right? Yeah. But then again, that's like also what Channing Tatum's character Slater wanted to do. Yeah. And that's what he did. He tried to suppress that memory over and over again and just let it be forgotten.
Because his whole thing is, this movie's about, like I said, it's about the idea of gaslighting, the idea of pretending like the abuse that happened didn't happen, right?
Yes.
And then it's about one more thing. It's about trying to forget your trauma, or should you learn from that as a person and grow from it? And instead of like you end up taking it out on other people, right?
Yes.
I think this movie, it is so unbelievably clever, and I think it's about so much, and I think it's crazy that it touches on all these things in a very short runtime, I think. Just an hour 40. But that gets me into, we both loved it,
Yes.
but I don't think it's perfect. And let's touch on a couple of the things leading.
Oh wait, let's talk about the ending though.
Yeah, I was about to say.
So, in the ending,
did you like the ending?
Overall, yes.
Yeah.
I did like the ending because it made me, I guess it just shows like how clever she is as well. And I guess the fact that now she has power too. But I don't know. Yeah.
I ask you this because, not me myself, but I read some people are very mixed on the absolute ending of this movie.
Is it because like the change of power?
Because she ends up being complicit in the idea of it. Not the change of it, but the idea that she decides to kind of aid in this in a way. But that's only someone's takeaway.
Yeah.
But then you could also argue this movie ends messy on purpose. I think it's supposed to encourage discussion. I think it's supposed to be like, well, what did you get from it?
Yeah. I don't know. Because I mean, at the end, it's like great because now she's not like, now she's living this opposite life now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's also using what's so abusive towards him.
Yeah.
Now, even though, but he's also a terrible guy. What he's been doing for years.
Yeah, like literally, like, I don't know how long they say that again.
Yeah, but like we're assuming it's years too. But I don't know. It's such it's like what you said. It's mixed. I can see why it's mixed. So because even now I'm like, yeah, that's great. But at the same time, I'm like, that's also bad what she's doing too. So
at the end of it, this movie ends the way it ends. I think there's no real other way for this movie to wrap itself up other than, because what would happen if she killed him? Then they would be stuck on the island, it implies, or something like that.
Yeah.
And wrapping that up, the way this movie decides to end itself, even if you feel one way or the other about the ending, there's one line early on that says success is the best revenge, and it pays off. That's what this movie ends up being about. It fully succeeds in what it set out, what it said. And that leads into, I do want to say that I do want to ask you guys, what do you think of the ending? I want people to comment that. What did you feel about the ending? Opening that up to discussion to see if people responded to it or not. Yeah. But let's get into some specific negatives, because we talked so great about this for so long. Was there anything you weren't the biggest fan of on this?
No, not really. I mean, there wasn't anything that really stood out to me
as negative.
Yes.
Mine, if I'm just being nitpicky here to get this across, is I wish I could feel more of the island itself as like a character.
Okay, like the setting more.
Yeah.
I think just because it felt so repetitious on like certain areas of the island. Yeah. And honestly, the only time I ever felt expanded was whenever Frida was looking at things that she wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, because that looked crazy. That looked completely not like the rest of the island. And that's really it for me. Yeah. I mean, I just thought that and it's a little too short. I just wish that I could have gotten to know some of the characters more. Like, I think Haley Joel Osment's great for this, an example. And we didn't even really touch on
I think if I knew the other two girls that were
I would have liked to known them a little bit more.
Like how they got there. Yeah, too, because I enjoyed how the roommates got there, and then like Sarah as well, learning how she got there, because she was just because they say something too about Sarah, which that's why I'm like, oh wow, I really like her character too, because there was a point in the movie where it seemed like competition that she talked about, and then eventually she talked about like, oh, like we shouldn't as women.
No,
like,
because
compete.
they're playing friends. They're playing games with them, early on. Whenever like he's literally doing this on purpose. Yes.
And then I guess you realize like she was like a barista.
Oh yeah.
And she just wanted to see Slater as well.
Yeah. No, and then they say, we don't actually know any of these people, and then that's whenever they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. And then So, overall thoughts. What'd you think?
I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great movie, especially for somebody's first time directing. That's insane.
I also thought it was great. I thought, same as you.
Great.
Can't believe.
Frosted Flakes.
Yeah, like your cereal thing.
Yeah.
I thought genuinely crazy that this is a directorial debut.
Yeah.
I don't know if Zoe Kravitz co-wrote this.
She did.
But she did?
Yes.
Well, this is an incredibly well-written script. Unbelievably so, I think. Some of the commentaries a bit on the nose, but you know what? I think it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that some of the navigation here between all of this stuff is only like really accomplished directors you would expect can do that, and she's right off the bat.
Yes.
1 for 1. And
1 for 1. Yeah. That's 100%.
100%, yeah.
Got a good rating.
And I thought this was great. It looks beautiful. It navigates.
The cast is great.
Incredible cast.
Yes.
And incredible imagery as well in terms of the island itself, how like great everything looks. I doubt it's a set. I'm sure they filmed this like on location somewhere. But overall, if you wanted to listen to this and you haven't seen this movie, there's some hard stuff in it to watch, but it's great. I really do think that this is worth watching. So overall, what's your score?
4 out of 5.
I'm also giving it 4 out of 5, but when we were talking about it, I was like, oh my God.
I was like 4.5? I was like, no, I'm going to stick with 4 out of 5 right now.
Yeah.
Just until I would watch it again.
If you see it in one of our, like,
if you see my letterbox, it changes, you know why.
Or if you see our best of list and this happens to make it or an honorable mention, then you know we ended up liking it more the second time. I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. So, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. What are they going to do?
They're going to like, comment, and subscribe.
Please do. We also want to know what you thought of this movie. I'm really curious. I want to know, I mean, how do you think about Twist? What do you think about them?
Call us Storage because you're curious.
It's not bad.
Did you like that one?
I did, actually.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
I'm kicking my feet.
So much for...
Thank you guys for watching.
And listening.
Yes.
We will see you next time. We are going to... We don't have anything for you this week because there's nothing out. So
yeah, that's true.
We'll see you next week for Beetlejuice.
Yeah,
it's Beetlejuice 2. Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. I'm excited to see.
I am excited. Yeah. Thank you guys again so much for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.